We are continuing with the program, and next is a panel session on enabling conditions for AI in Europe. In this panel session, the European industry leaders, renowned AI research experts and policymakers will give their perspectives on how to capitalize on Europe's excellent research capacity and mobilize scientists to join forces and make Europe a powerhouse for AI. Develop an inclusive and competitive European AI community, and also provide easy access to a world-class digital infrastructure, including data, compute infrastructure, and testing environments to AI talents. The session will be moderated by Ms. Eva Martinkenaite. She is among the key figures at Telenor Group, contributing to building AI research and innovation ecosystems in Norway. She leads a team of data scientists and machine learning engineers in Telenor, and several high-profile appointments in AI. She, as Vice President of Telenor Research and Head of Analytics and AI team, Eva is responsible for advancing research and driving research-based innovation in Telenor within data analytics, so AI and also the Internet of Things. So, Ms. Martinkenaite, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Europe has the potential to become a world leader in artificial intelligence. With world-class research centers, a booming computing infrastructure, robust position in selected technology areas, and also industrial locomotives, driving the AI uptake in several industries, spanning from automotive to healthcare and agriculture. In order to drive excellence in AI research and innovation that Europe is so striving for, bold actions are needed for bringing innovations fast to market and ensure scale in the uptake of various AI technologies. Among other things, that also involves access to necessary compute infrastructure and also policy mechanisms aimed at driving AI innovations made in Europe. Welcome to a first panel discussion in the day 2 of high-level conference on artificial intelligence here in Slovenia. I'm very glad to introduce a stellar panel of renowned guests, research experts, policy experts, and European industry leaders. You see them here on the screen. So let me start with our first guest, Carme Artigas, the Secretary of State for Digitization and Artificial Intelligence in Spain. She made a recording for us, and I would like to start this panel with her message. Listen to it.
Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate through this video in this high-level conference with AI, from ambition to action. Artificial intelligence is a disruptive technology with a huge transformative potential that will mark the path of digitalization over the next decade. An essential vector for the digital transformation that Spain is facing to modernize and reinvent our productive and economic model. And also a bet as a country to boost our competitiveness, efficiency, and productivity through the integration of AI in the value chain of all industries. The government of Spain has a decisive commitment to AI. We have published a National Artificial Intelligence Strategy, ENIA, which includes important projects such as an innovative program of research and development missions with the aim to integrate AI technologies in the strategic sectors of our economy, a chair of AI and democracy to analyze social and ethical challenges of the technology, the new National Observatory for the Social Impact of Algorithms, or the Charter of Digital Rights, which includes specific rights on AI and neurotechnologies. Initiatives with an ethical and humanistic perspective of AI, placing people at the center of technological development. This is an objective that we share with our European partners, and we are already working together on crucial projects such as the proposal for the European regulation on AI. Because only together we will be able to move towards an ethical and human-centered AI as a key element for the new European digital decade. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Carmen Artigas. The title of the panel discussion today is The Enabling Conditions for Artificial Intelligence in Europe. Let me introduce the panelists. I'll start from Jan-Jona Jaworczyk, Head of Networking Infrastructure Center at Joseph Stefan Institute here in Slovenia. We also have Mia Petra Kumpula-Natri, a member of the European Parliament. We also have with us the Ivo Wollman, Acting Director of Data at the European Commission. And also Jo de Boek, Executive Vice President and CSO at IMEC. Antonio Kruger, a Professor of Computer Science and CEO of German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence. So let me start by giving a first question to all of the panelists. As we heard today and yesterday, Europe has the potential to become a leader in artificial intelligence research and innovation. The question is how to get there. Given that Europe has excellence in research capacity and a couple of selected AI technology areas and applications, my question is, how can we mobilize AI talents to join forces, making Europe a powerhouse of AI? Who wants to start? Maybe you, Antonio.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Welcome to everybody. I'm glad that I can be part of this discussion. So, in fact, Eva, you mentioned it. Europe has a very strong scientific foundation in artificial intelligence. It has shaped AI in the last 60 to 70 years, since AI concept have been around. And it has had always the potential to attract talent. But of course, as we know, in the last 10 to 15 years, research in AI has been accelerated also in other parts of the world. Of course, we have the US, we have also China, who made an absolutely remarkable effort in the last 10 years to ramp up their scientific research resources. And I strongly believe, that we have to continue to strengthen our scientific foundations. We have excellent scientific networks actually in Europe. We have ALICE, which is a network that aims at scientific excellence in machine learning, that has done remarkable efforts in the last 3 years actually to build up structure, in particular to support PhD students. We have CLAIRE, which is an organization of AI labs and institutions with more than 420 institutions in Europe now and more than 24,000 researchers that support CLAIRE. And I think we can build upon these structures and foundations. I'm also convinced that in order to attract actually talent to Europe, we have to think about what these talents are interested in. One, of course, is to work in excellent research environments, in excellent AI ecosystems. That includes also the possibility to build up startups, from their ideas, and do this in a fast and easy way, access to capital, of course. But I also believe that Europe has the potential also to provide a place that still has to be built. So we have these networks, these infrastructures, these programs that we need to further strengthen. But I also strongly believe we need something like a lighthouse for AI, which has to be a physical place, actually, that has to be somewhere in the heart of Europe. That attracts talent, that has infrastructure, that is shining really, showing actually the excellence, scientific excellence of Europe, and that has the potential also to attract talent from all over the world. And then, of course, we need to build upon existing European collaborations on AI. Europe has always been very strong in doing joint research across national borders. AI, and of course, being also part of the world AI research community. I think this is important to strengthen also this. And if you think about what young talents are searching for, this includes also the question of meaning and purpose. And I believe, we heard this earlier from the commissioner, I also believe that the human-centric and trusted AI approach that we focus on in Europe is a very good starting point and should be, and we should work on this to make this actually one of our prime directives, to provide a place where trusted AI and human-centric AI can shine, and this will attract talent all over the world if we manage to build such a place.
Thanks, Antonio. Very great words. Now I'm turning over to you, Yuna. Antonio also mentioned that to attract best talents, one needs to have excellent infrastructure, among other things. What are your views on that?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, I come from the infrastructure side of things, and I would really like to stress your point on international collaboration, because recently we have seen a very great effect of a number of infrastructure proposals in Europe, and many of them, one way or another, are of course tied in with AI. I'm talking principally about Euro HPC, which has been a very successful way of investing and expanding in supercomputing capacities in Europe. But one of the most important details in this initiative, from the inside, let us say, is that it has allowed multiple European countries to invest together and to collaborate while developing new great infrastructure supercomputing centers. And of course, while doing this, we have to work with our future users, and we have to see what kind of demands they will have. And AI, and not just AI, but applications that tie in with AI or use AI technologies and knowledge-based technologies in different areas are more and more frequent. So this for us has been very important. But on the other side, of course, there is data. In the previous presentations, we have heard a lot about the importance of data. And it's perhaps unfortunate that European Open Science Cloud is a different initiative. On the other hand, it's very good that both sides are being taken care of by great communities. And it's important to know that we have managed to build in support for large data, but also very high network bandwidth, so that we will make sure that data is not just well classified and preserved, but also available in the centers where we will be able to process them. Now, of course, we know that the quality of data and the availability of data is crucial for good AI models, but it's also crucial for understanding the models and their quality. So we're looking forward when building the new infrastructure to make sure that there is enough capacity to preserve the software and the data and the models, so that existing experiments can be rerun, compared, and that we can support, let's say, the scientific approach, not just the more application-oriented approach where you are satisfied once the data is processed and you have the results, but are then perhaps unable to review the process.
Thanks a lot, Una. You touched upon compute, of course, infrastructure, and among other things, data. So naturally, I'm moving over to you, Ivo, and ask about, okay, if we want to mobilize those talents and really exploit the excellence as an opportunity in Europe, what's the role of data?
Yeah, thanks, Jeva, and many thanks for the invitation to be part of this panel. Now, I'm going to echo a number of the points that were actually made by the by the commissioner. Now, data is one of the elements to attract good people. You need to have the data available. The basis for AI is data. If there's no data, then you won't have AI. So there actually is a very good reason why having more data available is the first point of several of the national AI strategies. And on data, we are really at a pivotal moment, I would say, in the data economy. There's going to be a second wave of innovation based on data, and there will be more waves of innovation based on data. A lot of that will be industrial data, and we really have to be equipped to benefit from that. If we do not act now, we are going to have a problem in the coming decades. Now, for that reason, we put in place the data strategy at the beginning of last year. And the aim is, of course, to have more data available, including for artificial intelligence. And we have to do that in full respect of European values, in full respect of European rules, regulation. Now, the strategy looks at the legislative framework. It also looks at data infrastructure. It has been mentioned as a very important element, but also the skills to handle data, not just the skills of experts, but also the skills in general in the population of handling data. And of course, last but not least, there is this notion of creating common European data spaces, because we realize that you cannot treat the data in the same way if it's industrial data or health data. They have completely different characteristics in terms of privacy requirements and also the involvement of government. Now, so we are implementing this data strategy, these different blocks that really come together. And the Data Governance Act, the first policy initiative under the data strategy, aims to regulate intermediaries that help to bring the supply and the demand of data together. And that proposal is very well on track. Now, we're also working on a proposal for the Data Act, and the Data Act is going to look at more the substantial matters of who can do what with the data, who actually has rights to access the data and to use the data, an interesting area. Then we also have a strong strand on making more public sector data available for use in AI, and also for training algorithms in general. So areas like statistics, the environment, mobility, different areas where actually the public sector has invested in having big data sets, we would like to make sure that these data sets work for the economy and work for society. Now, the policies go hand in hand with funding. So for example, in Horizon Europe and also the DigitalEU program, we are going to support the creation of these common European data spaces that I mentioned. Now, we want to create a healthy and competitive data economy with more data available for use for AI. And of course, the data has to be used in line with our values. Now, this will be the basis for more innovation. And of course, it will also attract people, and that was what the question was about. If we have data available, good data available, we can have the people here that work together on the data, and we will keep the people here instead of seeing them fly to other continents.
Thanks, Ivo. Thanks a lot. You heard about the policymaker talking about the great ambitions about sharing data, making data accessible as a traction point for talents. What's your view from a more probably practical point of view, doing AI, building AI, also moving AI fast from research to market? What do you think, what could attract the talents in Europe and make Europe the powerhouse of AI?
The question was to me.
Yes, it was to you.
Okay, sorry. Thanks, and happy to be on the panel. Prefer to be in Slovenia for this, but virtually works, fortunately. Well, the take I would bring here is the fact that AI is going to be everywhere. We focused a lot on the data. We focused, of course, on the infrastructure. The messages of the Commission and Commissioner Breton are very clear. I think what I learned in practice, right, is to see that we have to make an effort to bring everyone in the game, and to make sure that we're not focusing on, well, of course we need high ambition, but you're not focusing only on the ambition, but also explaining it to the public. And public in broad sense, right? Of course, universities and research centers are there in full force. They're really deploying a lot of very interesting research programs. And I had the privilege to hear in Belgium, in Flanders, be one of the members to set out the AI program, which actually, and that's nice to have seen in practice, is that not only universities and research centers, but also industry federations, legal and ethics, data in society team has been built, but also then in general, of course, industry and government being close to this. And a very important part of the program is about bringing the public in, making sure that everyone understands that this is not a threat, this is an opportunity, and that it lands in every aspect of life without being threatening in that aspect. So I think that's a very important element that will also, help to motivate our youngsters to move in this very broad challenge, in the very broad arena of AI, and to build careers in that respect, and making sure that the benefits are reaped in Europe, but also in their street, right? I mean, in their local and in their local habitats. That is important. And then I think, we stressed data. Let me also stress the test and experimentation need. It was mentioned indeed that Digital Europe will focus on test and experimentation. And one element of that, and for IMEC, I think it's relevant that I bring it to the table, is that data and algorithms don't go without hardware. And it's been mentioned, the HPC has been a very important element in the strategy. I think we also need to look at, for instance, distributed AI, the way that we will get the data from, for instance, industry, as was mentioned, as one of the very important elements in Europe. So that distribution, the distributed way of doing AI may mean that aside, of course, the continued emphasis on data and making those data available, that we also have to build infrastructure, hardware, and test and experiment with that, and bring our European industry that is still strong in IoT, in sensing, in compute back into the game to make sure that we don't miss out on that part of the ecosystem. That would be my 3 and a bit minutes introduction, Jeva.
Thanks, Jo. Thanks for your views, also from the more practical point of view. Now I would like to turn over to you, Mia Petra. Commissioner Breton mentioned a very important aspect. He said that, well, in order to build the powerhouse of AI in Europe, we need to combine the ecosystem of excellence and ecosystem of trust. This is essential for Europe in building that powerhouse. My question to you is the following. From your point of view, how can we develop an inclusive and competitive European AI community? What actions needed to be prioritized?
You hear me now?
Now we hear you.
Okay, good. So for me, it's a strategy that we have to put in practice now urgently as we see the technical development speed and then also other continents that deliver. And it is for us that what brings us together, it's a motivation for the European values to take on board on the future guidance. So increasing amount of AI is not aim at itself, but then on what purpose. And there the Europeans should find the motivation that the purposes we are using it's very important. So I think the strategy, we have to deliver a good stand also on the ideas that we think together, we invest together, and we share resources together. And resources being here free in a some thinkable manner if you think about the data. So that governing the data on the right way is like a resource that is not scarce, as we normally have the resources that are scarce, but now they are scarcity for the European actors. So when we make good legislation, waiting eagerly also the Data Act to see the light of the legislative purpose to have them data solved. But then how to solve the talent and then how to see this inclusive and competitive way. We need to take everybody on board. So then on the talent, I see also we cannot leave half of the resources unused, and I refer to the gender balance on the AI community. So why not to have more inclusively women on board? And it starts really from the STEM, taking young children on board, everybody on the technical fields, but then also should lead up to the developers to be inclusive societies. And that there we could do some difference if we play our cards right. And also that where we aim, if it's not biased data we use for the AI solutions, then I would underline this good question that inclusive and competitive needs to be value-based. And it is when we have a lot of resources dedicated to this, when we invest together, we have European programs to start with, and then in every step we take values on board.
Thank you very much. Now I'm also getting a little bit more practical and a little bit more specific, since the title of the panel is How to Go from Ambition to Action. Let me move back to you, Jo, again. And one of the strengths of Europe, and it was mentioned many times, we have excellent research capacity, we have great universities, we have great production, and Anton also mentioned that. The problem in Europe is moving this research excellence to the market fast. My question to you, Jo, then, what are the key bottlenecks today from your point of view? Why can't and aren't we able to move that excellence in research to market fast enough? And how can we actually enable that?
Well, first of all, Eva, I would say it's maybe not as negative as you put it. We may be able to do it still when we have the right elements of our strategy in place. I think very practically speaking, what we see actually very close by when we want to move research results to the industry, that we have the usual suspects come in quickly, right? The larger companies that have the absorption capability to bring the AI know-how and knowledge into their own teams. We've looked at, or actually scanned, if you want, the ecosystem relatively broadly when we started the research program in the focus here. And we saw that some companies actually are ready to adopt. There are some others that are, lukewarm. They're like, they don't really know how to engage. And very interestingly, that part of the cohort, if I can call them then, that is actually not acting quickly also in getting those skills in, because the threshold is apparently too high. And they also have a very hard time to find the right consulting to bring the views and the insights on how even the initial experiments will bring a return on their investment. So I think that's a very important element, is the training aspect, if you want, of course, and we mentioned that, bringing AI researchers to the industry. We very often find these AI researchers with high ambition going into the industry being demotivated quickly, because they see that the leeway or the support or the investment capacity that the companies may have or want to bring is too low because of the return on investment not being clear. And that is, and just to quote again Commissioner Breton, is very important for the startup community, the small and medium-sized enterprises, because of course they need to focus on their core business, may not see that their core business is being changed by AI, and hence invest too late. So therefore also in our research program, we have emphasized, and that's true also for the European programs, to test, to experiment, to make sure that companies are part of the research outcome, or at least that they are very much in sync, because they can deliver the specs, they can deliver the test facility, they can provide potentially their initial data sets so that we can teach them how to make them effective, and make sure that whatever is put in terms of energy, literally energy efficient AI, but also energy from the companies, is used in the most effective way to focus on how to change their business process, how to change their product, how to change their interaction with their customers, and to not be superseded or overrun by some, sidetracked by something that is happening because they're not ready to engage. So I think that is very important, the training and the focus on the ROI and bringing that into companies, to sum up my comment, Eva.
Thanks, Ivo. I want to challenge you, Ivo, a little bit on this data sharing part. It sounds really ambitious, and you mentioned a number of initiatives. If I asked you, could you name 3 top priorities in your head, on your table now? What are the 3 most important things to do in order to actually get access to data, get good collaboration opportunities for European companies to actually build AI? What are those 3 top things in your head?
All right, the top 3. Okay. First of all, I think we have to tackle the issue of lack of trust. By the way, when I talk about data sharing, that doesn't mean that all the data is going to be available for free to everyone. There can also be data sharing arrangements against remuneration in more limited setups. But a lack of trust in terms of data sharing, making your data available, it's a key issue that we are tackling with the Data Governance Act and, well, also with the Data Act. A second big issue is legal certainty. Now, we see that there is new value in data. Everyone would like to get the value of the data for him or herself. But unless we make sure that the value of the data is shared by more people, the data cake is going to be smaller than it could be. So that is something that we should get right. The question about who can access and use what data in order to maximize the value of the data for society. So that is the big question that we're going to look at also in the Data Act. And then the third one is interoperability issues. At the end of the day, some very practical things to make sure that data can be used together, also across sectors. Now we're working on these common European data spaces, make sure that data is available within a sector and can be used within certain sectors, but there's a lot of potential in data sharing also across the different sectors. And if we forget that, we're creating silos, and that's a big problem. So that would be my number 3 in this respect.
Very good. Do you have any good collaboration examples when it comes to data sharing in Europe? Can you share any with us?
Yeah, some broader examples. In the agricultural sector, there is a code of conduct where actually the people in the value chain have come together and they try to get to agreements on how data should be shared. It doesn't mean that all the issues are solved. There are still issues also in the agricultural sector. Now, another successful, very concrete example is related to the pandemic. So there we had the Escalate project, and there the scientific community and pharma companies, they came together to share data to analyze the COVID-19 proteins. So the goal was to find an effective therapy against the virus in the shortest time possible. And that was actually a quite successful collaboration and also a good example of data sharing. Now, the Escalate project also shows the huge potential in data sharing for altruistic reasons, not just for profit purposes. So what is this data altruism? It's a possibility for individuals and also companies to share their data for the common good. So you can give your data for improving traffic or for improving health research. And there are currently very few mechanisms in place to make this happen in practice. It's actually something we look at in the Data Governance Act. And again, this type of work is essential to make more data available for artificial intelligence. I think it has a big future. So on data sharing, there is much potential, there are many problems, and a lot of work needs to be done. And I gave my top 3.
Thanks. Sounds very optimistic. Now I'm also turning back to you, Jona. And of course, you said you come from the infrastructure point of view. And of course, I will start with a question around supercomputing capabilities. So it's a no-brainer. Computation infrastructure is a necessary ingredient for developing and deploying AI applications and doing research in Europe. My first question to you, so what are the plans of the European supercomputing infrastructure, EuroHPC, and how is the convergence of AI and HPC transforming scientific and industrial applications?
Okay, great question. To begin with, I have to say that EuroHPC as an initiative has been very effective, but it's also been adjusting its goals surprisingly quickly. We had the privilege to have one of the first machines built here in Slovenia because for a number of reasons our national plans and EuroHPC happened to be coincidental in time and let's say funding. And we have been very lucky because we have tried to imagine what the demands in the next 5 years would be. So we have made plans for a rather unconventional machine that includes quite a big data lake and very high connectivity. In a way that has been an experiment, and all the other machines are being now looked in a similar way like experiments with different designs, different infrastructural highlights, and we are learning from them to adjust and build better machines, so machines that do not build on current ideas on what an HPC should look like, but on what we see that people are needing, what they fail to do with current machines. For me, the most fascinating detail here is that the nations that are building the future machines actually want to follow how the current machines are being used. Their users, their research groups participate. They participate not just by using the machines, but by staging broad benchmarking and workshops to try out the machines. So it is really a very, very fast turnaround of ideas, technical experiments and redesigns. I think if we compare this with the previous approach of building and maintaining classical HPCs, this has changed a lot, and it has also spurred a new way of talking to the vendors. They have become a lot more flexible. They talk among themselves a lot more than a few years ago. So I think the whole area in Europe has changed a lot with this. But not just that. Previously, we had the machines that were more or less specialized for a number of specific research areas. And now we have a lot more of different kinds of users on the same machines. And for us who work in infrastructure, this is a wonderful opportunity because we can foster interdisciplinary work. And AI, of course, is one of the recurring themes. Many different areas of research nowadays are using AI, and of course we have pure AI research, people that are either optimizing existing algorithms, working on explicable AI algorithms, and so on. And when we put those people together, very interesting things can happen. And when we join them with world experts in different packages that are actually users at this point, we can see very, very quick progress. So I think we come back to the human point that turns out that after all this investment in the infrastructure is the point that gives us the most advantage and makes us the most optimistic for the future.
But of course, nothing is sort of perfect. We want more of this. We want more investments of it. We want to attract more talent. So what are your key kind of our headaches now going forward? What are the key bottlenecks we really need to take action on?
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that, because when I stopped with people, I will now continue with people. For us, the biggest bottleneck is a great lack of experts. First, experts in infrastructure, so computing engineers, system administrators that would be capable to tackle high-performance computing, high-performance networking, very large data lakes. All these are very advanced technologies that are developing very quickly. And of course, there's also a lot of demand for these profiles in the industry. And at this point, while we can build very competitive systems in the public sectors, we often cannot offer competitive positions to these kind of people. But at the same time, I think education and training and making sure that we maintain this very good position that we have in Europe with available talent and science and technology knowledge, I think making sure that AI as a theme is well represented in not just in higher education, but also, let's say, in a wider educational model. When we look at strategies of some other areas, for example, Japan, they have not just oriented towards producing a sufficient or maybe a larger number of scientific experts and technical experts that could work with supercomputing and AI. They have also thought of including this kind of information in this schooling of people that will model the strategy and the legislation, but also in primary and middle school, because if people don't understand the tools that will become ubiquitous, if they don't know when the tool is giving them good results and what kind of information it uses, they will misuse it, and our current, let's say, reservations towards AI will become just bigger. If we manage to make people understand this technology, so even people in the street and young people, we will get better feedback and less problems in the future.
So it corresponds to what you also said, and Mia Petra, that public awareness, skills, upskilling, reskilling people, investing in our education is of crucial importance. Now, I have to ask you, Mia Petra, on that point, because you mentioned the skills, you mentioned education, and now it seems to us that even the high computing infrastructure experts need that uptake capacity in Europe to be in place. My question is, so what can European Parliament do? Or what are your general perspectives where we should actually do more concretely to get skilled people, education in place already in the primary schools? Mute?
It's all the time in my mind the triangle of what we need for AI, and then the goal for where to AI to take us is a political question. So that the corners of the triangle is really the infra we spoke about here, then it's data we spoke about here, and then it's the people and knowledge, and then the talent attraction is one, and then talent and use our ecosystem of education really. But then this week in the European Parliament, we just made the blue card to be used easier way to get the people come here and enjoy it here. And then the society of the Europe, it's important to have it a good society, and we want to spend money on the education. Unfortunately, it is not a European Parliament to do, it's much on the member states, but then all the initiatives on the Erasmus, we could make them fly. And then just a moment before I entered this computer, I was plenary to hear the State of the Union. And then also von der Leyen underlined the skills to promote our digitalization. And then also the new ALMA program for exchange possibilities also for young workers. So we know we need these technological skills on all levels. Not a single unemployed, not even immigrant, but that have them on board is a crucial question. But I want to underline here to finish that our AI ecosystem needs to be open for curious innovators, both big and small. So the startup SMEs and all that create our way of ecosystem that is that we are world leaders thinking where to go, and we will do it so that it's ecologically and socially sustainable AI ecosystem. So it's not enough education alone, not enough data alone or infra alone, all that combined and common goal.
Thank you. So that triangle really inspired me, and I don't know how about you, Antonio, but question to you a little bit from the bird's eye view. So if we're going back, or actually forward 5 years from now, then, and we actually want to assess the success of how successful we are actually in building AI powerhouse. What could be the measures? What should we measure actually 5 years from today? How successful we are actually in building the AI powerhouse in Europe? What's your view on that?
Yeah, of course, measuring success is important, but as you know, designing the metric also can lead to wrong implications, actually. I strongly believe, actually, if you look at research, Europe is doing pretty well, as I mentioned earlier. And there, of course, there are metrics that you can use, you know, scientific metrics and so on. In the end, I believe actually that for Europe, it's more important that we enable actually innovations and transfer. And then you would rather look at the impact actually of our research initiatives, of our basic research on new business, actually, on market share and so on. I think this is, in the end, very important. I also believe that this is something where we still can improve actually our activities. I could envision there are already here and there are already activities, for example, of transfer labs where research and industry work together. As we've heard, you know, data is very important, and we have this strong asset in Europe of industrial data coming from SMEs, but also from large companies. And we have all these data activities, including also architectures that leverage services on data, like Gaia X, for example. And but the important part here is to also bring the innovative and strong research in Europe together with the data from industry, and have formats to basically propel this synergy of innovative research and data, which, for example, in Silicon Valley works pretty well, actually. And this is something I can also see, and I see no reason why this shouldn't work in Europe if we provide a good infrastructure for this. And so the measuring really would be, I believe, in the end, the impact of the transfer of startups, of innovative business in Europe. And I think we've made some progress in the last years. You know, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, I would have been maybe a little bit more pessimistic, but I think we are on a good way. There are certain hubs also in Europe that develop ecosystems. For example, if I look at Germany and Berlin, how the AI community in Berlin with startups, also research is picking up and accelerating. I see great collaboration between, for example, German research institutions and French research institutions in Europe, very strong ones. I've mentioned Alice and Claire, the two important networks. So there is potential actually to leverage actually the excellence in research that we have in Europe into market impact.
Antonio, thanks. You didn't mention one thing. We have policymakers around here in Ljubljana, and also I'm sure listening, and also we have several of them on the panel. So what could be our concrete, or your concrete asks to policymakers in Europe?
Yeah, so thank you very much. Again, similar to Jan Jona, I'm as somebody who primarily comes from research, I welcome this question very much. So I believe that we should leverage on our existing strengths. So one, for example, is a very strong ERC, so European Research Council programs. I could see maybe a focused program on AI. This could be one possibility. Yeah, and the second and third initiatives that I would like to see is one, a strong support for collaboration between research institutions and industry. I mentioned transfer activities, transfer labs, the possibility actually for PhD students to work in industrial contexts, to work with industrial data, and at the same time giving industry the possibility to participate at cutting-edge research, because this is something that we've observed in the last 5 years. The times where we had these kind of strong separation between basic research and applied research, those times are over. We have a much more integrated research landscape, also in Europe, and this is something that I believe should be supported. And then the third point that I also mentioned in my introduction is that I strongly believe that Europe, and I know this is difficult in Europe, you know, we are a kind of a federal organization which has all its kind of advantages that decentralization has, but I strongly believe we have to make a statement to visibly show that AI is upon the one of the prime directives on the European agenda for the future, and we need, I believe, a real lighthouse, not something like a distributed, federated lighthouse. We need to support networks, we need to support all these kind of federated activities, but I believe we need a central place, yeah, and it has to be also a physical place where people can meet, you know, where that is attractive for young talents, where we put actually trusted AI, explainable AI, which is the core also, a core can be a core feature of AI in Europe. Still, there are so many open research questions around how to really make AI system explainable, that explain themselves, their decisions, you know, that makes them transparent, that a place that provides large-scale test beds, we heard about this, but also computing infrastructure. Jan-Jona mentioned this, the modern AI computing infrastructure is different. It shares similarities to HPC, and of course we can leverage on our great experiences in HPC in Europe, but it has also differences. And here we are strong in Europe actually. NVIDIA, for example, one of the prime manufacturers of AI hardware, actually works together with European research institutions on the software architecture, on the software stacks, on the new on the new decisions that have to be made that are different actually from traditional HPC. And I strongly believe we could leverage on this.
Thanks a lot. And we're moving towards the more the ending part of the panel. And what I would like to give each of you are an opportunity to conclude with a couple of statements. And my question is, of course, since the panel and the overall conference is about moving from ambition to action, so action is a very important thing. So what could be concrete next steps for enabling our current and future AI talents, getting access to fantastic data, among those industrial data, compute infrastructure, testing environments? And aren't we missing on something else? Final words from your part, Jona.
Thank you. I think we have started moving very quickly and in the correct direction. And my highlight would be to make sure that we have the capacity in people, the support in research, including explainable AI, and interdisciplinary work, not just in different areas of science, but also science and policy making, as well as science and industry. I think if we maintain these directions, if we make sure that we don't fail there, with everything else, we are moving in the right direction, and we should be getting really good AI infrastructure and AI development and effects from that in Europe.
Petra, your final highlights.
Yes, I think we are on the good way to do it. And as a politician, I want to see that we do the right things with AI. And it's not just limiting in my things, but it's the usage where we can use it for health, for energy, for second globe, second human body, as we heard in the other panel, that the twins and all that. But what I do disagree with the German previous speaker is that that we should have one concrete center, because for me it's the most important issue that this will deliver in the networks, distributed way on the lighthouses, because there's no way that German doesn't need AI, and it could be the center somewhere else for the young and talent to do. But this modern way, actually, we're all doing that now from the several countries, is the way to get European talent attracted. And then we are also in charge of the making enough the computing power so that all that can happen. And now we do have 7, also one in North Finland called Snow, Lumi in Finnish. And I'm happy to see the minister here with the very new one in Slovenia. So I would build on the European talent that is distributed and in many sectors also. So not to take it only on the computer scientists on board, but very close to the doctors to save our lives and energy engineers to save our planet.
The beauty of Europe is actually having multiple perspectives and multiple ideas. And then personally, I'm sure many of you believe in the dialogue. So thanks a lot for your comments. That only makes our discussion even more intriguing. Now, over to you then, your final highlights, or what are concrete next steps from your perspective needed?
I was going to second the last comment and also make sure that we understand that the ambition that Dr. Gruber mentioned is also very important. I think we need iconic places that attract the international ecosystem of whatever application to Europe, because high ambition attracts high level talent. We have seen that in many different regions globally. So that is very important. But my comment was going to be in line with the last, is that when I talk about the application and the use case in a small region, even as Flanders, many localities in this region are saying that, you know, we need something ourselves, because our small and medium-sized enterprises, they will not go to whatever capital in Europe where the iconic place is. They need to have people around them that they can basically bicycle to in order to get the information and get the feedback and the talent. So I think the teachers, the doctors, every entrepreneur needs to be embracing this with the public. Otherwise, it'll be a disaster to roll out, and we'll have a large communication campaign against the introduction of AI rather than for. So I think that is very, very crucial. And I think we are aligned, but the modus operandi is still to be defined. So very interesting discussion, much appreciated.
Much appreciated indeed. And I'm going over to you. I'm Brussels, Ivo. So you're sitting in the Commission, embracing all those multiple perspectives, multiple views, and the dialogues. How do you see that, your final highlights on how and what actually we should do to enable that high excellence in research, high or very fast research to market, and at the end of the day, have excellence and new products and services where Europe actually is both inclusive and competitive when it comes to AI. Your final highlights on that.
Yes, but before going to the highlights, you commented that my view was optimistic after my last intervention. And yes, my view is optimistic. Yes, Europe can be at the forefront of data. It can be at the forefront of AI development. And as Antonio said, we will have to leverage on existing strengths like industrial data, like our public services that are really strong. But it's not going to happen by itself, and we need to act now. So speed is of the essence. Now, for the data, what would I like to see happen very quickly? The Data Governance Act needs to be adopted as soon as possible. And there, it has been understood by the Parliament and by the Council. And indeed, there is a speedy process, and we're very grateful for that. So we hope to move forward with that very quickly. The Data Act that we will put on the table, there will be many discussions, but also there, we will need to act quickly to make things happen, to have more data available for AI. Then there is the work on the data spaces, crucial for AI. It's not by coincidence that in our digital program, the Digital Europe program, the data and the AI are taken together in one big strand. Now, a last thing I would like to mention, and it's about the link between the areas of data, the area of AI, and the area of robotics. There, we have made sure that the communities that were actually somehow separated, it's also linked to the comment that Antonio made about industry and research communities not always being on the same page and not always working together. We have created a new public-private partnership that actually brings together the three communities, and we see a very important role for this new partnership to move forward and do all the things that are needed, and also bring research and industry closer together in these three areas that are not separate areas, they're actually one big area. I will leave it at that.
Thanks. And you sound realistic, I think, Ivo, and that's good. Antonio, I have to close, of course, with you. You have a chance to close this, and your final remarks and highlights.
Yeah, thank you very much. So just so that you don't get me wrong, I strongly believe actually in having decentralized centers actually that help actually local industry, that basically leverage actually the diversity in Europe. You know, I think this is super important. Therefore, I believe that the existing networks that have started to work actually in research, but also in transfer activities, need to be strongly supported. But when it comes to attractiveness to talent, that's the focus here. And in research, then I believe a lighthouse, a physical place, you know, is beneficial. And in particular, when it has so much to offer as actually this perspective of explainable, trustworthy AI, which is something, is a strong aspect of AI research in Europe, different to other parts of the world. And in this respect, I would like to advocate actually the lighthouse without actually somehow de-evaluating other decentralized approach, which I also strongly believe we need. So a combination of both, I believe, you know, strengthening decentralized structures, you know, for the regions, actually for the particular needs of the regions, but at the same time making bold statements as the European Union in AI research. I believe both is needed, and it will be then successful if we manage to go into that direction.
Thank you. Let me conclude by saying the following. Well, the purpose of this panel was to discuss the requirements, enabling conditions to create thriving ecosystems of excellence and trust in Europe. And I put a couple of highlights and a couple of notes after our discussion today. First, we need to leverage on our strengths in Europe. We have excellence in research. We're actually building our testing environments. We have good examples around Europe and how we move research to production. We're also investing in compute infrastructure. We need a lot of work to do. So I would say that it's probably not optimistic or pessimistic. We are realistic. We have that fantastic triangle that Mia Petra said. We have people, knowledge and skills, compute and data. And we need to work together in order to enable that thriving ecosystem of excellence and trust. Let me thank all the panelists today. Let me give a big hand to all of you who managed also to come, but also join us online. And let me thank the Slovenian government and also the European Commission for enabling this panel, allowing us to speak and giving the voice of research, industry, and policymakers here in Europe for making Europe a powerhouse of AI. Thank you.
And big thank you to you too, Ms. Martinke Najte, for moderating this very interesting discussion.